Beyond the Gates spoilers tease that Allison is acting in the most reckless and disturbing way imaginable, ignoring every warning sign and every boundary drawn by Chelsea. Chelsea had pleaded with her not to interfere, had told her point-blank that she and Madison were together, that their relationship was solid, that Allison's lingering presence was unwanted and intrusive. Yet Allison refused to listen. Her obsession had grown like a shadow stretching across every corner of Chelsea's life. What began as subtle interruptions and inconvenient phone call here, a coincidental appearance there spiraled into something darker. Allison had turned fixation into a ritual. She watched Chelsea. She memorized her routines. She inserted herself into moments that weren't hers to claim. Each action carried with it a hint of malice, a deliberate push to destabilize the fragile happiness Chelsea had found with Madison. The early signs were easy to dismiss. Chelsea, exhausted from work, thought she had caught sight of Allison lingering by her apartment building one evening. Madison brushed it off as paranoia. She wouldn't go that far, Madison insisted, trying to reassure her. But Chelsea couldn't shake the chill. The way Allison's eyes had followed her at that party weeks ago, the way her laugh lingered just a little too long when Madison spoke, it was enough to plant seeds of dread. And those seeds were sprouting fast. By the time Allison's surveillance escalated into full-blown harassment, Chelsea and Madison's lives were no longer private. Their dates were interrupted. Their late-night conversations seemed haunted by echoes of Allison's name. Madison tried to stand strong, wrapping her arms around Chelsea with promises that love could withstand obsession. Yet Allison didn't stop. She became an ever-present ghost, invisible at times, but always lurking just behind the veil of normalcy. Chelsea's patience crumbled piece by piece until she snapped, demanding Allison leave her alone. It should have ended there. But instead, it was only the beginning of the nightmare. The turning point came when Chelsea, thinking herself safe after Kat left her apartment, let her guard down. Kat, distracted and in a rush, waved goodbye with a promise to meet later. Chelsea, finally alone, breathed relief until the faintest whisper of footsteps behind her cut that breath short. Before she could even register the danger, a cloth pressed tightly over her mouth and nose. The pungent sting of chemicals invaded her senses. Panic exploded in her chest as her body betrayed her, growing weak and heavy despite her desperate struggle. Allison's grip was merciless, her voice hissing like a serpent in Chelsea's ear. "Just relax, Chelsea. Stop fighting me." And then, blackness. The cruel question remains, what did Allison want? Was this a power play, a twisted game of leverage against Chelsea to bend her into submission? Or was her desire something more grotesque, more desperate? The ambiguity makes the horror unbearable, because Chelsea herself had no way of knowing. She only knew the raw, blinding terror of regaining consciousness in a darkened room, limbs bound, mouth gagged, and Allison's shadow hovering close. She couldn't scream. She couldn't move. The world had been reduced to the sound of her rapid breathing and Allison's unnerving calm. When Chelsea's eyes adjusted to the dim light, she saw Allison crouched nearby, hands trembling as they reached for her. Allison whispered words that might have sounded affectionate to herself, but landed on Chelsea's ears like daggers. "You don't understand yet. You think Madison loves you, but Madison doesn't know you the way I do. Madison doesn't see the parts of you I see." Her hand lingered too long on Chelsea's cheek, brushing away tears that Chelsea would have preferred to hide. Chelsea recoiled, gag muffling her furious protest, but Allison only smiled. "Don't waste your energy. You'll need it later." This is only the beginning. For Allison, the abduction was not just an act of cruelty, it was her declaration. She believed, in some distorted corner of her mind, that Chelsea belonged to her. That by isolating her, by forcing her into submission, she could recreate reality itself. Chelsea's outrage only fueled her delusion. Every muffled scream, every glare of hatred from Chelsea's eyes, Allison interpreted as proof of passion. Proof that what she had done was justified. Proof that love could be stolen, reshaped, and remade in her image. Meanwhile, Fate conspired to complicate her plans. Kat, absent-minded and halfway down the street, realized she had left her bag at Chelsea's apartment. It was a small mistake, a simple oversight, but one with the potential to unravel Allison's entire scheme. Kat's decision to turn back carried with it the fragile thread of hope. Perhaps she would walk in at just the right moment. Perhaps she would see the danger Chelsea had been dragged into. The question lingered like a spark hovering over gasoline. Would Kat ignite the rescue, or arrive too late to stop the horror unfolding? Beyond this immediate tension, other lives swirled in their own webs of deception and fragile truths. Doug, ever the confidant, offered Ted advice about his crumbling marriage with Nicole. At first, his words seemed helpful, carrying the weight of experience. "You can't fix what doesn't want to be fixed," Doug warned him. "Sometimes the best thing to do is cut ties before you bleed out completely." Ted, weary and broken, listened, wondering if Doug's counsel carried genuine care or manipulation disguised as wisdom. What Ted couldn't see, what Jacob might soon uncover, was that Doug had his own motives. He wasn't just a bystander in the unraveling of Ted's life. He was a player, weaving threads of sabotage while pretending to untangle knots. When Doug leaned closer, sharing information that seemed crucial, it carried the faint scent of poison, knowledge that could either protect Jacob or trap him in a larger scheme. Doug's loyalties were shadows, shifting depending on who stood in the light. As Allison tightened her grip over Chelsea's freedom, Chelsea fought back the only way she could, with her willpower. She closed her eyes, blocking out the sight of Allison's deranged devotion, forcing herself to remember Madison's touch, Madison's voice, Madison's promise that she was not alone. Every memory became a shield against the despair threatening to consume her. She had to believe someone would find her. That Madison would sense something wrong. That Kat's forgotten bag would turn into a lifeline. She couldn't allow Allison's whispers to penetrate her resolve. Yet fear gnawed at her with every tick of the clock. The longer she stayed bound and silenced, the more Allison seemed to settle into her fantasy, speaking as if they were already living the life she imagined for them. It was suffocating, not just physically but psychologically, as if Chelsea were being erased piece by piece and replaced with the version Allison demanded. The tension outside this room continued to build. Madison, unaware of the abduction, went about her evening with the sinking feeling that something was off. She had texted Chelsea, but no reply came. She called once, twice, then 3 times, each ring unanswered. Her stomach tightened, memories of Allison's interference resurfacing with a vengeance. She wouldn't dare, Madison muttered, though even she didn't believe it. The truth, hidden behind locked doors and muffled screams, was worse than anything she had imagined. And still, Doug's shadow loomed larger. His whispered conversations with Jacob hinted at truths too dangerous to remain secret. Secrets about alliances, about betrayals, about the fragile threads tying everyone together. If Doug's game succeeded, Ted wouldn't just lose Nicole, might lose far more. Jacob, burdened with the weight of Doug's revelations, began to wonder whether helping Ted meant playing into a trap designed to destroy them both. Kat's return to Chelsea's apartment was supposed to be nothing more than a minor inconvenience. She cursed herself under her breath for being careless enough to leave her bag behind, turning back reluctantly with no sense of the danger that was unfolding inside. The evening air was still, heavy with a strange tension she couldn't quite name. Her footsteps quickened unconsciously, as though her body sensed what her mind had yet to process. She pulled out her phone, debating whether to text Chelsea again, but something held her back. She wanted to surprise her friend, retrieve her bag quickly, and leave without disruption. What she could not anticipate was that every second mattered, and silence was both her ally and her undoing. Inside, Chelsea fought a losing battle against her restraints. The ropes cut into her wrists, every attempt at movement scraping skin raw. Allison loomed nearby, watching her with unnerving serenity, as though Chelsea's suffering were proof of devotion. The contrast was grotesque. One woman bound and terrified, the other basking in her own delusion of control. Chelsea's muffled cries grew desperate as she strained to hear anything beyond the walls, some sign of the outside world. And then she heard a faint creak of footsteps on the porch. Hope flared in her chest like a sudden fire, threatening to consume her fear. Allison froze, head snapping toward the sound. Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Who's here?" she hissed, her calm unraveling in an instant. She pressed a finger to her lips in mock reassurance, as if Chelsea had a choice but to remain silent. The knock on the door came next, light and casual. Kat's voice followed, bright and unsuspecting. "Chelsea? It's May. Left my bag. You home?" The effect on Allison was immediate and catastrophic. Her face contorted into a mask of fury, torn between rage at the interruption and panic that her secret would be exposed. She whispered sharply at Chelsea, "If you make a sound, if you try anything, I swear you'll regret it." Chelsea, trembling, could do nothing but glare back, her eyes screaming what her gagged mouth could not. "Kat, don't come in. Don't trust this silence." Kat, puzzled by the lack of response, tried the handle. It resisted. "Weird," she muttered. She considered leaving, but unease prickled at her skin. Chelsea wasn't the type to ignore a friend at the door. Her instincts, usually reliable, told her something was wrong. She knocked again, harder this time, and raised her voice. "Chelsea, are you okay?" "It's me." Inside, Allison scrambled. She shoved Chelsea into a corner, draping a blanket over her as though it could erase the evidence of captivity. Then she stormed toward the door, forcing her face into a mask of false calm. She cracked it open just enough to peer through, feigning surprise. "Oh, Kat. Sorry, I didn't expect anyone." Kat blinked, startled to see Allison instead of Chelsea. Her gut twisted. "What are you doing here? Where's Chelsea?" Allison's smile was brittle, her tone dripping with fake casualness. "She's not feeling well. Asked me to stay with her. She's sleeping." The explanation landed wrong. Kat studied Allison's expression, searching for sincerity and finding none. She felt the weight of the silence pressing from inside, the heaviness of something unsaid. She wanted to push past Allison, demand proof, but Allison's body blocked the threshold like a guard dog. Kat forced a laugh to mask her suspicion. "Well, can I just grab my bag? I left it here earlier." Allison hesitated. That single pause, too long and too obvious, was enough to deepen Kat's unease. At last, Allison stepped aside, but her eyes followed Kat with predator-like intensity. Inside, the apartment looked oddly disheveled, as though hurried hands had moved things without care. Kat's eyes flicked around, her heartbeat quickening. She retrieved her bag but lingered, straining to hear. For the briefest moment, she thought she caught the sound of a muffled cry beneath the blanket Allison had tossed across the couch. "Everything okay?" Kat asked slowly, testing the air. Allison's lips twitched into a smile too wide, too forced. "Of course. Why wouldn't it be?" Kat left, but suspicion gnawed at her with every step away from the apartment. She didn't believe Allison's story. And worse, she couldn't shake the feeling Chelsea was in danger. While this dangerous dance unfolded, Madison was unraveling in her own way. Hours had passed without a response from Chelsea, and dread consumed her. She paced, phone in hand, replaying every interaction with Allison in her mind. The possessive glances, the invasive comments, the chilling sense of entitlement. Madison finally admitted what she had been too proud to voice earlier. Allison was capable of more than manipulation. She was capable of harm. Madison dialed Kat, voice tight with panic. "Have you seen Chelsea?" "She's not answering me." Kat hesitated, torn between uncertainty and instinct. "I went by her place. Allison was there. Said Chelsea was sick. But something felt off." The silence on the line was heavy before Madison answered. "I knew it. She's got her. Kat, I swear, Allison has her. We need to do something." The stakes escalated far beyond personal suspicion. What was once emotional torment had turned into a matter of survival. Madison's determination hardened. She would find Chelsea, no matter what Allison had done to hide her. Meanwhile, the subplot with Doug and Ted deepened its own cracks. Ted, increasingly broken over Nicole's absence and the wreckage of their marriage, leaned heavily on Doug for guidance. But Doug's counsel grew darker with every conversation. "She's not worth the fight," Doug said one night over drinks, his voice heavy with persuasion. "You think she's your partner, but she's already made her choice. What you need to do is protect yourself before she destroys what's left of you." Ted, vulnerable and lost, absorbed the poison willingly, mistaking it for wisdom. Yet Doug's duplicity revealed itself in subtle Weishaupt truths dropped into Jacob's ear, insinuations that twisted perception. Doug spoke of loyalty, but his eyes gleamed with something colder, as though every word was part of a larger plan. Jacob, increasingly uneasy, began piecing together inconsistencies. Why did Doug seem so invested in Ted's downfall? What was he gaining from sowing division? Jacob confronted Doug cautiously, choosing his words with care. "You say you're helping Ted, but all I see is you pushing him further away from Nicole. What's your angle here?" Doug smirked, not denying, not confirming, leaving Jacob with more questions than answers. Sometimes, people need a little push to find the truth. And sometimes, destruction is the only way forward. The ominous remark lingered in Jacob's mind, casting doubt over every move Doug made. If Doug was orchestrating more than marital sabotage, what else was he capable of influencing? And how did it tie, if at all, into the chaos spiraling with Allison, Chelsea, and Madison? Back in the apartment, Allison's charade grew harder to maintain. Chelsea, though bound, radiated defiance. Her muffled protests, though quiet, pierced the silence with urgency. Allison alternated between soothing caresses and violent outbursts, her mood swinging wildly as reality and delusion collided. "Why can't you just see it?" she whispered furiously, tears brimming. "We're supposed to be together. Madison doesn't deserve you. She doesn't understand you like I do. I can give you everything." Chelsea shook her head violently, eyes blazing with rejection. Her refusal shattered Allison's fragile calm, twisting her love into rage. For the first time, Chelsea feared Allison might escalate beyond control, not just obsession, not just captivity, but something irreversible. Outside, Kat sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel as she battled indecision. She should have called Madison immediately. She should have called the police. But doubt clawed at her. What if she was wrong? What if Allison's story, as absurd as it sounded, held some grain of truth? Yet the memory of Chelsea's muffled cry replayed in her mind, louder each time. At last, Kat made the call. "Madison," she said breathlessly, "I think Chelsea's in trouble. I think Allison's keeping her there." The battle lines had been drawn. Madison's fury ignited into action. She wouldn't wait for chance or hesitation. She would confront Allison herself if she had to. The love she carried for Chelsea left no room for fear. If Allison wanted a war, Madison was ready to bring one straight to her door. And all the while, Doug's game simmered in the background, its outcome uncertain, its consequences poised to ripple through lives already teetering on the edge of collapse. The night thickened into a suffocating cloak, as if the air itself knew what violence was about to unfold. Inside the apartment, Chelsea's pulse thundered in her ears, her body aching from the restraints that kept her prisoner. Allison hovered close, trembling with the instability of her own obsession. She whispered fragments of promises, of futures that could never exist, her voice a lullaby twisted into something grotesque. But Chelsea's eyes remained defiant, a fire of resistance that refused to bend. Outside, Madison and Kat arrived together, urgency binding them into allies. Madison's face was etched with fury, her fists clenched tight as though she were holding back a storm. Kat, though shaken, carried the steadiness of someone determined to correct her earlier hesitation. They approached the apartment door, every step deliberate, every breath a gamble. Madison knocked first, loud and forceful, her voice cutting through the silence. "Allison, open the door. I know you're in there." The sound jolted Allison, who snapped toward Chelsea with a glare that bordered on hysteria. You brought them here, she hissed, as though Chelsea had orchestrated the intrusion. She pressed her hand over Chelsea's gagged mouth, silencing even the muffled pleas. Then she froze, listening. Kat's voice followed, sharper now, carrying the weight of truth. We know you have her. Don't make this worse for yourself. Just let her go. A fissure split through Allison's composure. She paced the room like a caged animal, muttering under her breath, torn between her desire to keep Chelsea and the dawning realization that her control was slipping. The knock came again, louder, unrelenting. Chelsea. Madison's voice broke, cracking with desperation. I'm not leaving without you. The sound of her name, Madison's voice, filled with raw love, rushed into Chelsea like oxygen to drowning lungs. She kicked against the ropes, struggling with renewed ferocity, her muffled cries transforming into guttural roars of defiance. Allison panicked, clutching her head, her fantasy unraveling thread by thread. She stormed toward the door, unlocking it just enough to snarl through the crack. Go away. She doesn't want to see you. Madison's eyes narrowed, her anger boiling over. You don't get to speak for her. Move, Allison. The door slammed shut again, the lock clicking. Allison pressed her back against it, shaking. Chelsea's muffled protests grew louder, no longer pleading but demanding. Allison spun on her, tears streaming. Why do you make me do this? Why can't you just love me? Her hand reached for the knife she had hidden in the kitchen drawer, a desperate last resort, gleaming in the dim light. Chelsea's blood ran cold. This was no longer about obsession, it was survival. Outside, Kat pulled out her phone, dialing the police with trembling fingers. Madison, unwilling to wait, pressed her shoulder against the door. We don't have time, she hissed. She has a weapon, I know it. The wood groaned under Madison's force. One more shove, and the lock splintered. They burst inside, the room exploding into chaos. Allison spun around, knife raised, her face contorted with anguish and rage. Chelsea thrashed against the ropes, muffled screams pleading for help. Madison lunged forward, unflinching, her love for Chelsea giving her strength she didn't know she had. Allison slashed wildly, the blade catching Madison's arm, drawing blood. Pain shot through her, but she didn't stop. Kat rushed to Chelsea, fumbling with the knots that bound her wrists. Don't touch her. Allison screamed, advancing with the knife. But Madison blocked her path, grappling with her in a violent struggle. The two women crashed into the table, shattering it, the knife skittering across the floor. Madison pinned Allison down, rage and grief burning in her eyes. You don't get to hurt her anymore, she spat. Kat freed Chelsea at last, ripping the gag from her mouth. Chelsea gasped, voice hoarse but fierce. Madison, stop. She's not worth it. Madison froze, her chest heaving, the knife now within reach. For one moment, the room hung on a precipice: violence or mercy, vengeance or restraint. Madison's hand hovered over the weapon, her eyes locked on Allison's. The sound of sirens in the distance broke the spell. She pushed herself away, leaving Allison on the floor sobbing, defeated. The police stormed in minutes later, pulling Allison into custody despite her screams of betrayal. She's mine. She was always mine, she wailed as they dragged her away, her voice fading into the night. Chelsea collapsed into Madison's arms, shaking but alive. The embrace was fierce, desperate, unbreakable. I thought I lost you, Madison whispered, pressing her forehead to Chelsea's. Chelsea clung tighter, her voice trembling. You'll never lose me. Not to her. Not to anyone. Kat stood nearby, relief washing over her in heavy waves. She knew she would replay the sound of Chelsea's muffled cries in her mind for years, but tonight, she had chosen right. Tonight, they had saved her. Yet while one nightmare ended, another thread pulled taut elsewhere. Doug's manipulations reached their breaking point with Ted and Jacob. Ted, broken by grief, confronted Nicole in one final attempt at reconciliation, only to discover that Doug had already poisoned her against him with carefully crafted lies. His world shattered, he spiraled into despair, his trust in everyone, including himself, obliterated. Jacob, unwilling to let Doug's schemes destroy another life, exposed him. He revealed Doug's duplicity to Ted, laying bare the deception and sabotage. Ted's grief turned into fury not at Nicole, not even at himself, but at Doug. Their friendship was scorched to ash, the betrayal too deep to forgive. Doug, cornered, smirked even in defeat. "I told you," he said coldly, "sometimes destruction is the only way forward." The words haunted Jacob because he knew they were not just about Ted. Doug had planted seeds of chaos in more lives than one. Whether his downfall was final or merely temporary remained uncertain. For Chelsea and Madison, however, the story found its fragile resolution. They walked out of the apartment together, Kat by their side, the cool night air wrapping around them like a promise of renewal. Chelsea's wrists bore the raw marks of captivity, but her spirit, though shaken, refused to break. Madison's arm throbbed with pain from the knife wound, but her heart beat steady with the truth. Love had endured. They didn't speak much as they left the scene, sirens fading behind them. Words felt unnecessary. Survival had bound them tighter than ever before. Allison's shadow would linger, but it no longer had the power to consume them. The gates they had walked through, the gates of fear, betrayal, and obsession, had led them to the edge of ruin. But together, they had stepped back, choosing love over despair, truth over lies, and mercy over vengeance. And in that choice, they found their way beyond the gates.